So apart from wildlife, I think the major limiting factor to getting a successful outcome is weed control. When we talk weeds, we always think different things often. Some things will overlap, but other things will probably talk different plants. First of all, woody weeds. So if you've got blackberries or hawthorn or broom or gorse, these sort of weeds that we all see as weeds probably, you need to probably even delay your plant, especially if you've got gorse and broom where you've got long-lived seed in the ground. Don't rush your planting because you've got some free plants coming from a government funding project. Just really assess the situation and work on your woody weeds, get the seed bank activated and try and eliminate as much as possible before you start planting, because doing woody weed control after planting is a nightmare. It's doable on a very small scale, and if you've got the time, but if you're busy farming or you're busy doing other things and you've got a reasonable size planting, if you've got gorse and broom coming up amongst your plants, it becomes really, really labor intensive to do anything. So woody weeds work a few years ahead if you can. When I talk weed control, I mostly mean the second point here, and that's grasses. And that's often very hard, especially I do a lot of work with dairy farmers, and whenever I call beautiful lush grass a weed, I need to say it 3 or 4 times. Now it is a weed. So it's competition. So you could actually just read competition control instead of weed control. So I'm just calling grasses weeds because they compete against the seedlings that you're trying to grow. And it's really important to understand. I can't overemphasize that. I think, in my experience anyway, up our way, I don't think it's much different down here. The main reason for failures is actually the competition from existing vegetation. More than wildlife even. More than livestock getting in. The main failings come down to the grasses coming back, or even not being controlled enough in the first place, or coming back too quickly before the seedlings had a real chance to become established. Grasses compete for moisture. They're really effective at taking those late rains that you get in December around Christmas, or even the January rains. Unless it's a huge, long, steady rain, which is very rare, the grasses are very effective at taking any moisture that hits. It goes down maybe that far, and the grasses are sucking it up, and they're looking beautiful and green, and the seedling that you've planted amongst it is getting nothing. The other thing about grasses that we underestimate is the chemical competition. The technical term for that is allelopathy, but a better way is to think about it as like companion planting in your veggie garden. If you're gardening, you've got plants that go well together, and you've got plants that really don't go well together. That's what it is. It's actually chemical warfare in the soil. Most plants are very good at holding their own ground. Some are really, really good at it. If you look at cypress pines were mentioned before, they are very good at eliminating other plants. And that could actually lead, in your situation, Will, that could lead to a case where you might find that other plants are having trouble growing near them in the long run. Don't know if you found that yet or not, but cypress pines are very, very good at inhibiting other plants growing near them. Eucalypts are very good at that too, especially once they get bigger. And grasses are very, very good when they're really well established. And that's why you don't see eucalypts very often just volunteering up in a paddock somewhere. You often see eucalypts coming naturally where there's nothing at all, like a gravel bank or a clay bank where there's no competition. So just that observation tells you something about what grass is able to do. So getting rid of the grass Now, this is the tricky bit here is that on a bigger scale, it is very, very difficult to do without herbicides. And I gather that some of you probably don't want to use herbicides. Neither do I, really, if I can help it. But we find that to establish trees in old pasture or in well-grassed areas, you need to somehow get rid of the grass. So the old-fashioned way is to cultivate again, and cultivate again until that seed bank is exhausted, and then plant. Or you do the smothering with black plastic and cardboard and mulch and all sorts of variations of that. But you need to actually exhaust that seed bank. So just to smother it, an old pasture where there's a huge seed load, you'll kill the grass off, and then you plant your seedling in there, and all the seed will germinate and come up quicker than your seedling, and you're back to square one. So really work hard on that's if I've told you nothing all day today, if I can get that one across, I think if you haven't had that experience yourself already, I might be talking to the converted.
Herbert, what is that period of exclusion? How long would you exclude other species around the baby tree? We say
up to 2 years is good.
2 years.
And then I show you a photo right in the beginning where within 19 months, the photo on the very back of this shows the grass about that high after 19 months, but the trees are 2 and 3 meters high. So the point being that once the trees are big enough, they can actually turn the table on the grasses as far as competition goes for moisture. So their roots are well down and they can get the moisture that's lower down, but also they are starting to put out chemicals. They turn the soil biology into their own favour. That's the problem with using herbicides, is that broadacre spraying, you're opening everything up to weeds. You're going to get lots of thistles and lots of other fast life cycle weeds coming in. By just spraying a narrow strip, so if you do a 60 centimetre or 2 foot wide circle for each seedling, that's probably enough, but you've got to maintain that too for a bit longer. And that's the tricky bit then. So to do that on a bigger scale, and that's why planning is so important, and looking at different projects and finding a way that you are happy with, as long as you're aware that the competition of grass will inhibit the growth of the seedlings. And if the grass comes back sooner and you get a bad year, so we're trying to overlay all these things. You get a good year, you get away with blue murder. You can sometimes plant in long grass, in high rainfall areas especially. So I hope I'm not wasting too much time here. I'm getting off track a little bit, but I've got customers up at Chudley, which is sort of 1.2 meters rainfall on average on the Western Tiers. Heavy clay soil that's really good water holding. And the particular customer is very much not interested at all in disturbing the ground. As soon as you chip the grass off anywhere, you get a thistle growing, and they just don't want any thistles. So we literally have done now for 20 years, planting probably more like 500 to 1,000 every year on average. Just chip the grass off and put a seedling in. In a good year, we've had 80-90% success rate. In a bad year, we've had 20% success rate. The customer is happy to hedge their bets over the years. Have a good year, you have a bad year. As soon as you start doing that in a dry area, low rainfall area, you're going to have that 20% success rate more often than the 80%, and then it goes down to possibly almost zero in a bad year. Getting rid of the grass, I find, to get the seedlings established is really important. One more thing about herbicides, the way I look at it, I hate to use them too, but I use an analogy because of the experience with tree planting that unless you get rid of the grass, and to do it on a bigger scale, it's very hard to do without herbicides. I've developed this analogy where I look at herbicides for tree planting like I look at taking antibiotics when I've got an infection. I'm throwing these toxic chemicals in my body to get rid of this infection. I know full well that it's killing all my gut flora as well, and I have to my body has to repair itself afterwards. If I use herbicides for tree planting, it's 1 in 100 years. So for that particular year, I might spray 3 or 4 times to get rid of the seed bank there. But that bit of ground is not going to see any more herbicides for the next 100 years while the trees are growing.